call this meeting to order. Welcome to the first hearing of the Subcommittee on Agriculture, Energy, and Trade in the 115th Congress. This is my first hearing as chairman of the subcommittee, and I'm pleased to be focusing on a topic that is important to both my district and America's heartland, namely small family farms. Small farms have always been a part of our nation's fabric, and it cannot be stressed enough that the small family farm is also a small family business. Many of our country's founding fathers started out as small family farmers. In a letter to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson even referred to agriculture as, quote, our nation's wisest pursuit. Although the industry has changed over time, obviously, agriculture is still a driving force in Americans' economy. 41% of all land in the United States is used for farming. U.S. agriculture has a $45 billion trade surplus with other countries. Let me repeat that. U.S. agriculture has a $45 billion trade surplus with other countries. While it may be surprising, over 93% of America's farms are still small family farms. Our nation's smallest farms continue to produce a significant amount of our nation's cattle, eggs, soybeans, and other goods. Small family farms are also at the forefront of the emerging sectors of agriculture. For example, direct-to-consumer sales through farm stands and farmers markets have greatly increased in recent years, and small family farms account for almost 60% of those sales. But more importantly, small family farms provide a living for people and places with limited opportunities and put food on the table for families across the world. And as I was saying earlier in discussions, sometimes I have to remind my colleagues from the cities that I like food, and food is not grown in grocery stores. While small family farms are a vital part of America's economy and food supply, historically low food prices have made it harder than ever to run a family farm. Since 2013, net farm income has dropped by 50%. And while larger farms are better equipped to handle periods of lower prices, small family farms get hit the hardest. In addition to low prices, small family farms have a multitude of other issues to worry about, from high taxes, increasing regulations, and trouble selling their products internationally. It would seem like government bureaucracy is only making it harder to run a small family farm. Today's hearing will be a tremendous opportunity to hear directly from the agriculture industry experts and even some firsthand accounts about what it is like to run a small family farm in 2017. Through the panel's testimony, this subcommittee hopes to further understand how policies can be developed to help, not hurt, help small family farms succeed. I now yield to the ranking member for his opening statement, Mr. Snyder of Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and like you, this is my first hearing as ranking member. I am very excited not just to be on this committee, but to be working with you, working to help small businesses and small farms across our country to continue to be the engine of our economy, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here. Agriculture is one of America's oldest and most important industries, where family farmers and small businesses serve as the linchpin. Most importantly, it's a vital part of the nation's economy, providing food and natural resources to millions. Although production has shifted to larger farms, small farms maintain significance in our economy. Based on data from the 2012 Census on Agriculture, there were 2.1 million farms in the United States, and 97% were small, family-owned operations. U.S. farms income experienced a golden period from 2011 through 2014, driven largely by the strong commodity prices and agricultural exports. But since then, the state of the farming economy has weakened. Low commodity prices and high costs have posed concerns for many farmers across the country. Market forecasts predict that these trends will continue. As a result of these concerns, small family farmers may face difficult choices in how to maintain their businesses. Small farmers experience many of the same concerns that other small businesses face. For example, even though USDA programs provide lending options specifically for farmers, access to capital remains difficult for certain subsets of agriculture, mainly startup and socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. Similarly, small farmers stress the need for comprehensive tax reform to reduce the complexity and burden that exist in the current tax system. And in order to continue to create jobs which drive the economy, many farms would benefit from sensible immigration policies to hire the workers they need. These policies are critical in helping our nation's small farms remain competitive in domestic and global markets. Small farmers need a strong commitment from Congress to assure them that agriculture remains a viable industry, especially as the gap between small and large farms become more divided. Today's hearing offers the opportunity to gain a better understanding of their needs and the challenges they face. It is my hope that we will devise solutions today that will help small family farms thrive. I thank the witnesses again for being here today, and I look forward to hearing your comments. I yield back.
I would just like to take a second to explain the opening statements and the timing. If committee members have an opening statement prepared, I ask that it be submitted for the record. Your timing lights you should have in front of you. You'll have 5 minutes to deliver your testimony. The light starts out as green, and when you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn to yellow. And at the end of your 5 minutes, the light will turn to red. And we ask that you try to adhere to your time limit. We're not going to shut your mic off. We're friendly here, but try to stick to the 5 minutes. With that, I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel of witnesses today. Our first witness is Dr. John Lawrence, Associate Dean and Director of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Iowa State University. Welcome. Dr. Lawrence is also a Director of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center and the Iowa State University Beginning Farming Center, which coordinates educational programs and assesses the needs of beginning and retiring farmers. He received his PhD in economics from the University of Missouri and received both his master's and bachelor's degrees from Iowa State. Thank you for coming to testify today, Doctor. Our next witness is Tim White, owner of White Farm, located in Lexington, Kentucky. He's Vice President of the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association and will be testifying this morning on behalf of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. White Farms have been operated by Mr. White and his wife for 27 years and is primarily a cattle operation with corn and soybean crops as well. Mr. White is a graduate of Eastern Kentucky University with a degree in beef cattle management. Thank you for testifying this morning, Mr. White, and welcome. Our third witness is Sarah Ricklan, a manager of Degner Jewel Farms. Did I pronounce that right? A hog farm in my district in Hudson, Iowa. Last fall, Ms. Ricklan was selected to participate in the Iowa Farm Bureau Agriculture Leaders Institute. Congratulations. Which brings Iowa's leaders in the agriculture industry to meet with agriculture policy experts here in Washington, D.C. She graduated from Iowa State University in agricultural studies and will be testifying this morning on behalf of the Iowa Farm Bureau. Thank you very much for being here. It's always great to see one of my constituents. And I will now yield to Ranking Member Schneider to introduce the minority witness, who I happen to know very well.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to welcome Chuck Connor. Mr. Connor is President and CEO of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives, where he oversees the organization's work to promote and protect the business and public policy interests of America's farmer-owned cooperatives. Prior to joining NCFC, Mr. Connor served as Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He also served as Special Assistant to President Bush and as an advisor to Senator Richard Lugar. Mr. Connor is a graduate of Purdue University, who I'll mention is in the Sweet 16. And I welcome Mr. Connor. Thank you for being here.
Dr. Lawrence, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about family farms. You'll be hearing from individual farmers this morning and their important perspectives on this panel. My comments are going to focus on the demographics and economics of family farms and the challenges they faced. And then finally, I'll share with you some of the programming at Iowa State University that works to help sustain family farms across the generations. I'm going to speak initially here using USDA definitions of farms on size. We're going to talk about resident farms, intermediate farms, and commercial farms, all of which would be, depending on your definition, may be small. Almost certainly most of them in Iowa are family-owned. I don't want to get too much into the distinctions, but it is important to note that of the 87,000 farms in Iowa, nearly half of them are considered resident farms, meaning that they're not farmers. Their primary occupation is off-farm or they're retired. So they still live in communities, they still contribute to the farm economy. Intermediate farms, those that have gross sales of less than $350,000 a year, make up about 40% of our farms, 26,000 of them. yet 70 to 90% of their household income comes from off-farm sources. The commercial farms, those with sales over about $350,000, or about 600 acres of a corn-soybean rotation, make up about a fourth of the farms. They control 67% of the land, and they account for 80% of the value of production. Again, family-owned, family-operated, small on some scales, but larger in others. They still have off-farm income in their households of about $100,000 a year on average. The policy that impacts markets and help farmers manage risk are going to be more important to these commercial farmers because they have more acres and more animals. Policies that impact rural employment and are beneficial to all farmers, but in particular those more dependent on off-farm income. The rural businesses obviously need those people for employees, and so it's this symbiotic relationship between those farms and the rural businesses. The current conditions, and you'll hear more about that from our farmers on the panel, but as we've said, commodity prices have dropped dramatically since their peak in either 2013 or, in the case of livestock, 2014. That's had an impact on financial conditions. I work with a kind of a canaries in the coal mine group that has talked to and tracked the financial health of farmers in recent years. Most farmers come into the situation in a strong equity position, yet that has been deteriorating. Many have been able to refinance to cover short-term debt needs and stretch that out over a longer period of time, and most but not all have been able to continue to operate and get financing. If prices continue as forecast, that equity will continue to slowly deteriorate. Certainly the most vulnerable are the younger producers who did not have that cushion going into this downturn. As we look at the challenges of sustaining family farms, I'm going to talk about three of them. First is just managing a business in a globally competitive environment such as agriculture, dealing with variable weather, variable markets, evolving technology, regulations, and narrow margins. Second is to be able to grow that business to not only support one family, but at times support two families as you think about an intergenerational transfer from one generation to the next. And third, often the most difficult and challenging, is simply the communication about the future of that farm. Farmers by nature do not like to talk about things like this, and yet it is important to plan ahead so everybody has a common vision and a common time frame. Iowa has the first in the nation beginning farmer center. It was created by the Iowa legislature in 1994 to assist facilitating the transition of farming operations from established farmers to beginning farmers. That center is part of the extension program at Iowa State University and the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. I want to talk about two programs in particular. One we call Returning to the Farm, which is for farmers who know who their successor will be, oftentimes a relative, a child. We get them together on a pair of two-day workshops and really start that communication process that will set the footing for the coming years to hold that discussion. A second one called AgLink works with farmers who do not have an heir already identified, but is a matching service of sorts. But unlike a dating service where we simply give each other's names, this is an interview process, a facilitated discussion over several months to make sure we pair up the right people and we continue to work with them into the future to try to move that business into the future intact rather than in pieces. There are many other programs working with these farmers, and I look forward to answering questions about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. Mr. White, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Blum, Ranking Member Schneider, for allowing me to testify today on behalf of the future of America's small family farms. My name is Tim White. My wife and I, Amy, own and operate T.A. White Farm, LLC in Lexington, Kentucky. We have a purebred Angus operation and a commercial cow-calf operation, and I am currently the Vice President of the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association. Cattle producers in this country are small business owners, by and large, with the average cow herd in the United States is 40 head. The current state of the farm economy is very much weakened. The cattle market has been in a slump that has many producers struggling. According to the USDA's Economic Research Service, this year marks the 4th consecutive year of farm income dropping on a national scale. Congress plays an important role in several areas that impact cattle producers, including regulation, tax, trade, and the Farm Bill. While these issues alone can be managed by producers, when combined with the losses of natural resources, urban encroachment, and natural disaster, we have a real hurdle that producers must overcome to be successful. The biggest concern of our small business is overregulation. The EPA's WOTUS rule is such an example. The overreach of this regulation would require many beef producers to get permits and to comply with those permits, which would be a huge burden, and not to mention it would open up lawsuits for activist groups. As a small business owner, I'm particularly concerned about the lack of outreach to the small business community by federal agencies such as the EPA. As a family-owned business, I know that this regulation would have had a negative impact on my operation. The positive news is President Trump signed an executive order requiring the EPA to go back and revise the WOTUS rule. We want to work together with the EPA so that we can get clarity that we need in the WOTUS replacement that works for the cattle producers, protects our water quality, and follows the rules of the law. U.S. livestock producers understand and appreciate the role that taxes play in maintaining and improving our nation. However, they also believe that the most effective tax code is a fair one. For this reason, a full, immediate repeal of the estate tax must be a top priority as Congress considers comprehensive tax reform legislation. As you may know, in 2012, Congress permanently extended the estate tax exemption level for $5 million per person to $10 million per couple. While this was a positive step, the current state of our economy has left many agricultural producers guessing about the ability to plan for estate tax liabilities. When it comes to trade, cattlemen have always been strong believers in international trade. We support positions at open markets and remove trade barriers intended to keep our products out of foreign markets. The most dependable way to secure access to foreign consumers is through free trade agreements because they remove tariff and non-tariff barriers. Another major item on the agenda for small family farms is the creation of the 2018 Farm Bill. With the Farm Bill in mind, cattle producers oppose the involvement of federal government determining how they market their cattle. We are strong in opposition to the GIPSA rule on competitive injury. If this rule is implemented, we are led to believe that the packers would offer one price for all cattle, regardless to the quality, and as they are not willing to open themselves up to frivolous lawsuits. NCBA would also like to reiterate the opposition to the mandatory government-run country of origin labeling, or COOL. Repeal of the previous mandatory program was necessary as it provided no market benefit to producers or consumers. I also would like to mention today the need for a stronger, more sufficient foot and mouth disease vaccine bank. Estimates show that if an FMD outbreak happened in the United States, it would cost our livestock producers billions of dollars in the first 12 months. NCBA also requests the support for funding of $150 million a year over the next 5 years. This is important to the beef industry as countries across the globe continue to grapple with foot and mouth disease. Again, I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I look forward to working with you and answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. White. Ms. Ricklan, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Rickleman, manager at Digner Jewel Farms in Hudson, Iowa. Let me begin by thanking Chairman Blum, Ranking Member Schneider, and members of the committee for allowing me the opportunity to share my story with you today. I especially want to thank my House member, Representative Blum, for inviting me to testify. Thank you for the warm introduction and this opportunity to talk about small family farms in Iowa. I'm a Farm Bureau member from Black Hawk County in rural Iowa, where I, along with my husband, help manage a 1,700 head farrow-to-finish pig farm. My husband and I are two of several producers who provide the hands-on daily work to generate a safe, nutritious, and affordable product that is consumed by families across the United States and around the world. My passion for agriculture started as a young girl, growing up on a small acreage and being heavily involved in the local 4-H club, learning about agriculture, caring for my animals, and preparing them for county fair year after year. This was the beginning of my love story with agriculture. Wanting to continue my education in agriculture, I attended Iowa State University, taking classes in agricultural studies with an emphasis in swine production. ISU empowered me to learn the skills and obtain the knowledge that I use on the farm every single day. Some of my daily duties include animal observations, record keeping, training employees, and public relations work. I love being inside the barn every day, working closely with the animals, ensuring they are given the best possible care. From early mornings to late nights, work on the farm is never done, and I wouldn't want it any other way. My goal in college was to find a career that would balance farm work with local, state, and national agriculture advocacy. I got involved with Farm Bureau 3 years ago, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to share my story of how I got started in farming and how important agriculture is to my family and rural Iowa. I truly believe that being on the family farm is the best career choice I could have ever made. While I couldn't be happier with my decision to farm with my family, we face significant challenges and threats to our livelihood. Being a young farmer, I'm concerned about the ability to continue this profession and one day pass it along to my children. I'm concerned about the ability, With commodity prices depressed over the past several years, net farm incomes have decreased by 46% over the past 3 years, with another 8% decrease projected for 2017. While grain and livestock prices have a major effect on our operations, the laws and policies that are enacted in D.C. also have a significant impact on the success of small family farms. In these challenging economic times, it is more important than ever that we have a strong and adequately funded Farm Bill. The Farm Bill provides a basic level of risk protection in bad economic times and in years with poor weather. Federal crop insurance in the Farm Bill has been successfully proven an essential safety net for family farms across the country. I hope that Congress will continue to appreciate the importance of the Farm Bill and pass it before the current Farm Bill expires. Another way that D.C. is affecting the family farm is through current tax policy. As Congress looks to reform our nation's tax policy, I hope that lawmakers will consider the impact any change will have on the thousands of family farms across the country. While lowering individual tax rates is a positive reform, family farms will ultimately pay more taxes if essential tax policies for small businesses are eliminated. Agriculture is a capital-intensive business, and being able to deduct business expense is a critical tool. This should include the ability to deduct interest expense. As a young farmer, I'm extremely concerned about the ability for the next generation to purchase their first piece of ground or expand their operation if they can't deduct interest expense. A tax reform package that doesn't include these provisions will ultimately increase taxes on family farms. On that same note, I hope Congress will finally and permanently eliminate the death tax while maintaining stepped-up basis. These tax provisions are essential to survival of the family farm. As I mentioned before, the pork we raise on the farm not only feeds families in Iowa, but also feeds people across the world. I am blessed to farm in an area of the world that is immensely fertile and productive. Our country grows far more food than we could ever use, with 98% of the world's consumers living outside of our borders. Agriculture is a growth industry, and expanding export opportunities is vitally important to the success and future of the family farm. I hope that Congress and this administration will push for expanded trade opportunities and work with other countries to negotiate trade deals that lower tariffs so we can sell more of our products to those markets. We face many challenges as farmers grow fewer and the divide between the general population and agriculture grows wider. But I am optimistic that if we continue to share our story, we can shine a light on the work we do to grow safe, affordable, and sustainable food for the world. Being a family farmer isn't just a career. It's a lifestyle of which I am extremely proud. Now pregnant with my first child, I look forward to the day when our little one can come out to the barn to see the baby pigs with me and my husband, to enjoy agriculture as much as we do. With a strong safety net, pro-growth tax policies, and increased trade opportunities, I know America's small family farms have a bright future. Thank you.
Thank you for your insights, Ms. Rickleman, and congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great news. I'd also like to acknowledge the chairman of our full small business community, Representative Shabbat, down at the end there. And thank you, Chairman, for honoring us with your presence at this subcommittee meeting. Tell that to the president today. Thank you, Ms. Rickleman. Mr. Connor, I'd like to recognize you now for 5 minutes.
Chairman Blum, Ranking Member Schneider, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for holding today's hearing on the future of the family farm. I am Chuck Connor, President and CEO of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives, and I'm honored to be here today in behalf of America's nearly 3,000 farmer-owned co-ops and their nearly 2 million producer owners. The focus on the future of America's family farms is especially timely today. As we work our way through the bottom of a price cycle, producers are looking to improve their margins in any way possible. In today's ag economy, the difference between making small profits or harboring very big losses is controlling your costs down to the very penny. Producers know that many of these costs are simply beyond their control. Some are driven by markets, others by Mother Nature. But some costs are also driven by public policy. These policies can act either as investments that help lower costs or as regulatory hammers that raise them. Our common goal, ultimate goal, is to preserve the productivity of our farms. Today, I'd like to focus on 3 issues before Congress with a direct impact on our members and their farmer owners: tax reform, immigration, and trade. NCFC supports pro-growth tax reform. However, some aspects of the House tax reform blueprint could profoundly impact farmer co-ops and their members. For example, the border adjustability tax. It includes a 20% tax on imported goods. This would be detrimental to cooperatives that import fertilizer, fuel, farm machinery components, other items. The blueprint also eliminates the deduction for net interest expense. Repealing the deduction for interest on debt would cause harm to farmers and their co-ops by hindering business expansion, new hiring, and product development. Additionally, the blueprint calls for the repeal of Section 199, the deduction for domestic production activities income. Section 199 promotes jobs. It promotes job creation and domestic production of goods. Section 199 benefits are returned to the economy through new job creation as well as increased spending on agricultural production and in rural communities. We urge you to maintain this incentive for domestic production. An immediate threat to many of our farmers is the lack of available labor. As part of the Agriculture Workforce Coalition, NCFC is seeking a legislative solution to address this threat. We must ensure our farmers have access to the labor they need to harvest crops and care for livestock. Unfortunately, instability in the ag labor workforce has reached critical levels today. Farmers face a shortage of legally authorized and experienced workers each year, and the cumbersome H-2A visa program isn't serving as a safety net to meet the workforce demands today. We can and we must do better for our farmers by modernizing our immigration system. This includes work eligibility for our existing workforce and a farmer-friendly program to provide for future guest workers for all of agriculture. Our farmers are also depend heavily on foreign markets, and trade is vital to the prosperity of our farming sector. While small farmers may not have access to international markets directly, the prices they receive for their commodities are clearly dependent on exports. Additionally, farmer-owned co-ops offer farmers access to the global marketplace by providing services that would be more difficult, if not impossible, to accomplish individually. The co-op's increased earnings due to foreign sales flow back to the farmer owners through increased patronage dividends, boosting farmers' income well beyond the farm gate. With over 95% of the world's population living outside the United States, expanding access to foreign markets is essential to our future success. This includes maintaining and increasing access to markets through existing and future trade agreements and leveraging export programs that serve as a catalyst for increased market access. In my written testimony, I've highlighted a few more issues of importance to NCFC. We must reduce agriculture's regulatory burden, as well as make improvements to our nation's transportation infrastructure especially in rural America. This should be a high priority. I've also included information on a new sustainability initiative NCFC has launched. In conclusion, I realize this testimony covers a lot of ground, some of which may be outside the jurisdiction of this subcommittee, but these issues are certainly no less impactful to the future of America's family farms. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you for your insights, Mr. Connor. I'd now like to recognize myself for 5 minutes. And this is a question for the entire panel. In the last 4 years that I've been in politics, I have met a lot of farmers in eastern Iowa. And I've yet to meet one farmer who started their family farm, who started out in farming, that wasn't involved in a family farm, that didn't inherit the land and the farm from their parents, or didn't purchase it at a severely reduced price, a less than marketplace price. I'm concerned about the shrinking number of farmers. I don't want 5 mega corporations to control our food supply in this country. And where I'm heading here is I'd like to have everyone's insights on financing to start farms. Is the credit there? Is it reasonably priced? Can a young person start out without having parents in the business and make it in a family farm today? I'm a small business person. I started out in software and made it. And in almost every other industry, you can start out in your basement or your garage and make it, potentially. But the family farm, I'm very concerned about the dwindling numbers. So I'd love to hear your insights on, can a person not inheriting the land or inheriting the farm make it today? Maybe we'll start with Dr. Lawrence.
That is a difficult challenge, and it's not a new one. We've often said you either had to be born into it, marry into it, or and some of those have higher costs than others. So we do see, and in fact, our Beginning Farmer Center does work with non-related parties to maintain a family farm. So it moves from one family to another. They just don't happen to be related to each other. We have a database that has over 700 young people that want to get into a farming operation, and about 35 existing farmers that want to find a young family to take over. So there's a bigger supply than there is a demand. The challenge is, how do we encourage more of the existing generation to move their assets into the next generation intact? It's easy to have a farm machinery auction and rent the farm to the the highest bidder down the road, but then you lose a family out of the community. There is a bit of a balancing act, though. If we're going to grow our businesses, oftentimes we have to acquire other assets. So where do they come from? Unless we can do value added or grow within our operations.
Mr. White?
I think when you, in our part of the world, there's young guys that are struggling, that are trying to get into the agriculture business, and in our country, cattle business. And several of them got in this high market, and now this market has gone the other way, and it has really killed their equity and capital position, if they had any to start with. So, when we look at it, to get into this business, for one, it has to be a desire and a life's goal, because this is not an industry that is easy. It's an industry you have to have discipline in. And you have to do things in the way we do it. And my operation is, we have to think out of the box and try to do it ways that other people aren't, kind of like a niche market. And to start on your own, it's tough, and it's hard for these young people to come out. And there's regulations that are in place that do hinder. And as Dr. Lawrence was just saying, we're talking about if there is any passing down, the estate taxes and stuff. Our business, like I said, is capital rich, cash poor. And so it's really hard. I think young producers have to start out maybe working with others that are already in the business and work through that way.
Ms. Ricklan?
I'm going to go off what Mr. White said. My family did not farm. We had an acreage, but I had a passion and desire to be in the farming industry. I wanted to be a part of it somehow. I didn't have the capital, but I went to Iowa State and had the desire and the passion for it. And I started working in the barns, just doing little tasks, and I worked my way up to herdsman and managing positions, and where I am part of teaching other employees. So I don't have any money invested in the farm, but I make the operation work. And this is how I think young people need to get into farming, not get so tied up with, I need to raise corn, soybeans, and I need to have a big green tractor. Maybe work on niche markets and partnering with others who are already farming, like I have done, and work your way up and eventually take over or expand in different operations in the farm.
Thank you. Mr. Connor, briefly.
Farming operation to get in farming today. But the key point that has been made is you know, you're not going to get into that farming operation because of, you know, great financial returns. There has to be a passion associated with the land, you know, with food production, you know, in order to drive you with this. Because if you look historically, the return on capital in agriculture just is never going to match other sectors. Just is not. We have highs and lows, but it's never long-term going to match it. So there has to be something else driving you. And when you have that passion, I believe there are many, many opportunities to get involved in agriculture.
It's good to hear. My time has expired. I now yield to Ranking Member Mr. Schneider for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you to the witnesses for your very insightful testimony. Mr. Connor, in many industries, I think they talk about psychic income, and I think that's what you're touching on, is that passion and where to go. I wish I had an hour to discuss some of the issues. We've covered so much, from technology to trade to immigration. Some of the things that jump out at me is the importance of access to knowledge. Mr. Rickman, you talked about the know-how of how to work a farm that comes with the passion, the access to capital, the access to markets. But as this is titled The Future of Farming, or America's Future in Farming, Dr. Lawrence, you said something in your remarks that struck me. I spent my career as a consultant to small business, family business, dealing with succession. And it's hard, and people don't talk about it. And if there's a way that perhaps working in public-private partnership, we on this committee might be able to help foster the opportunities for those discussions, the tools necessary to begin the conversation on succession, what might we do?
Well, I can give you one example, and this is a USDA Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Grant that Iowa State received. And one aspect of that was to train facilitators in both the public and private sector on how to start and carry out those discussions with farmers. And so we certify these people. Some are our extension folks, others are attorneys, some are financial managers that are looking for business, and see this as an opportunity to have an outside third-party professional sit down with both generations and really help facilitate those discussions. It's not about choosing the right legal structure. It's not necessarily about what the numbers crank out. It's, do they have a common vision? Can they communicate on things?
Are there obstacles besides having the conversation to passing the farm on? What are some of those obstacles?
Well, and you've heard some of those here today about tax issues and some of those types of things. A stepped-up basis is really an important one that we maintain. As far as other obstacles, sometimes is there enough growth or opportunity in the business to support two families? And oftentimes that involves somebody working off the farm, maybe multiple somebodies to work into it, as Mr. Rickman has spoken about.
Yeah, I'll open up to the rest of the panel as you see the need for succession. Mr. White, is your farm a first generation, second generation, your cattle operation?
My cattle operation is a first generation. And at this point, my kids, my son plans to come back. He's in college, and he's planning to come back to the operation. And I'm getting to the age that I'm having to start to think about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to transition this in the future. We just went through this in my family about 15 years ago, and with my family, my father was sick, and we went through some estate work, and that's why it's important to us from NCBA, from me personally, and that's why I'm here today. I mean, I have a bull sale Saturday morning, which is a major portion of my income, but this is important to me. This will be the future of my operation, and that's why I'm here today. the estate tax is huge for us. We have to be able to pass this along, because if I have to worry the next 20 years about saving money to pay my liabilities for estate taxes, that takes away from my operation to build it where I can make room for my son to come in to my operation to sustain both families.
Thank you. And before we go further, Ms. Ricklan, congratulations to you and your husband. The next generation of farmers is important. The last thing I want to touch on in my 1 minute, we talked a little bit about immigration. Mr. Connor, you talked about the need for immigration. And I asked this question yesterday in another hearing in this room. Assuming we could come together across the aisle and find a solution that addresses border security, comprehensive immigration reform, the CBO estimates that would add $2 trillion to our economy, the stability, how positive of an impact would that have on each of your operations if we could get there?
Well, it's a great question. I will just say it would have a tremendous positive impact, and it would create jobs and economic growth in this country, because we currently cannot get the labor force that we need to do what we do for America today, which is, feed and clothe them every single day. And it's getting to a dire circumstance. Just, very, very briefly, I mean, we have what is estimated to be up to 70% of our hired labor force on our farms and ranches today are those who may not be here with legal documentation, up to 70%. That's an incredible number. We can't, do what we do if we lose that labor force. It's just pure and simple. And the unfortunate part of that is if we lose that labor force, we're not, consumers aren't going to feel it in our grocery stores, or at least not very much, because we're just simply going to import that product. And that is a horrible, horrible thought, to think that we are driving production overseas for products that we can very, very competitively produce here in the United States.
Thank you. With that, I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing here today. And I would start out with this. Sometimes Mr. Snyder needles me, but I wanted to just ask you, Ms. Ricklan, are you as happy about Purdue being in the Sweet 16 as he is?
I would have to say no.
And Dr. Lawrence has already expressed his unity with you. And so, and for those of you who are not watching that, it was at the expense of Iowa State that Purdue was in the Sweet 16. Well, reclaiming my time. Hopefully that does set a good tone here in this committee. But when I listen to your testimony, Mr. Ricklan, I'm sitting here and I'm smiling for a whole series of reasons, because you do embody much that we want to see come into agriculture, and with an expanding family on top of it. I've long said, if you want to do something great for our country, have a lot of babies and raise them right, and the best place to do so is on a family farm. And so I'm happy to hear your testimony. I had a question. 1,700 head. How many sows is that? That's fair to finish, right?
1,700 sows.
Okay.
We finish 40,000 a year.
That resets my perspective on your operation and how busy you really are. So I hope you get a lot of cheap labor coming up in your family. And it reminds me, when you talk about niche marketing also, and that it would be 15 years ago, I remember a discussion that I had in Northwest Iowa with a family on the street of one of those communities I won't name here in the hearing. And at that time, if you were going to lay out the gross receipt cash flow for corn, it would be about $300 an acre gross receipts, and roughly. So they had 1,100 acres of corn. 1,099 acres of corn. 1 acre of what I would call a glorified garden, and out of that single acre, that family took $28,000 worth of crop off of that single acre in 2000, and probably the 2001 crop is what it was. And I remember framing that in my mind. And I gave a speech to Iowa State and said that out loud, and a couple of the kids were in the crowd that didn't know that. And they let me know there was probably $50,000 worth of cheap labor, child labor is how they described it. That was their joke and not an estimate. But someplace between $28,000 an acre for a labor-intensive, well-managed, well-marketed, irrigated, crop rotational piece of ground, that $28,000 an acre and that $300 an acre that's probably more like $700 an acre now. There are a lot of solutions for entrepreneurs that want to get into the business, and you've had your eye on it and you found that niche to do that. So I'm encouraged by that, by your testimony on it, and the list of components here, it seems pretty universal, and the death tax. It is a direct tax on the American dream itself. And when you think of the people that came over to this country to plant their stake out on the prairie, it was about leaving a farm or two or three for their however many children that they had. And when it interrupts that, and I didn't hear anybody say this, but I want to add it, that it takes sometimes generations to put together a unit. And that unit might be row crop and pasture and hay ground and grain leg and harvest stores and feedlots. All that balance of that package that's artfully put together over 1 or 2 or 3 generations, blown up by the death tax. And so that one really resonates with me. I think it hurts the family farm more than anything else. I hear the discussion on trade, and I think that's universal also. That we have a surplus and we need to promote the trade. So I think that I want to point also out that we're taking a good look at the vaccine bank, and that's an important piece. Maybe I'd turn it back to you, Mr. Ricklan, and ask you, was there anything, your hogs, Mr. White's cattle, is there anything that you heard there that doesn't match up with what you think between the two of you? And I'll turn back to Mr. White if he has anything either. You're in unit.
No, there was nothing I heard.
Okay.
I'm in agreement.
I
Okay.
agree.
Okay, I'll ask one then. Mr. White, could we open up trade with China if we did if we did identification and traceability on our cattle? Do you think that we would open up the beef trade in China if we did that?
I wouldn't say that would be the backbreaking issue. I don't think it would hurt things. I don't think it would hurt things at all. But I don't think I don't think it would be a big deal breaker. They are interested in knowing about where their product comes from, but they do know that the United States has the safest meat inspection and pricing. And we have the best commodities, and they do know that.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if you'd indulge me for just a quick moment here in this hearing, I would like just to turn to Mr. Connor and make this point that there are 103 million Americans of working age who are not in the workforce. Roughly 82 million of them would be available if we mobilized at, say, a World War II level. We've got over 70 different means-tested welfare programs that are paying people not to work. And I think that's at the center of that. Out of that 103 million, we ought to be able to find some people to go to the farm and do some work. So if you'd care to respond, I'd give you an opportunity to do that.
Well, I will respond, Mr. King, and you and I have had this conversation, I believe, in hearings in the past as well. And I will just say our evidence, time and time again, and would be happy to provide some of that documentation evidence to the committee, shows that these are jobs that Americans simply will not do. And I don't think it's fair to place it on the back of the farmer, to sort of go out there and try and solicit jobs among people that again, these are jobs that have been proven time and time again. It's been tried, it's been tested, in a number of states, and it just simply never works.
I promised you the last word. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Thank you. The gentleman yields. And now I'll recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Lawson, for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think one thing, too, like I heard my colleagues say, the government is paying people not to work. And that's really not true if you have the opportunity to really look at those people who are disabled, have all kind of situations in their families and so on. So the government is not paying them. This is to sustain their livelihood. Now, I have some question about immigration. And I heard what you stated earlier about you couldn't actually get to market, if you didn't have this. During the course of the campaign, there was a considerable amount of discussion about illegal immigrants. How do you go about vetting them that work on your farm? Or have you had any kind of problem? Because that's always what the biggest issue. And I would like to have Mr. Connor elaborate on it. Maybe some of you all can.
Mm-hmm. Well, Congressman, let me just say that this is a sizable chunk of labor on our farms and ranches, as I have noted. Estimates as high as 70% of our hired labor force. These are not people who come and go as a general rule. These are, in many cases, these are workers that have been on these farms for 10, 15, perhaps even 20 years. They're skilled laborers. They're skilled workers. And that's on the economic side. On the human side, in some cases, they're part of the families of these family farming operations. Been there a very, very long time, integrated into the community. And again, the key point here is if those people were not there, we would not do what we do for the American people in terms of food production. And we would, ship, and it's already happening. I could cite numerous examples where, we're importing a product, from somewhere else that we used to grow and produce here domestically simply because we cannot get the labor to do it. And I think that's awful. We ought to be growing and producing as much as we possibly can here in the United States. Use those labor. We have a saying within our organization, your fruit and vegetables will be handled by foreign workers. The only question is that handling going to occur in the United States or in another country? We want it to be here in the United States.
Right, and I'll try to be, but incidentally, Iowa State, and I know the University of Iowa, a little bit different there. I had the opportunity to go to the University of Iowa to take a job, but I ended up going to Florida State and coaching, and in '72, we played UCLA for the national championship. So that's March Madness is all over me at this particular point. But I will say one thing when you talked about the small farm is my father and my grandfather, pretty much farmed on weekends and worked into the city, during the week in order to really make things. I didn't really define it as being a small farm, but I guess it really was a small farm. The problem that occurred is that if they had not been working in the city by the time guys like me grew up who wanted to play basketball and stuff and didn't want to go back and do it, to work, they probably wouldn't have had any kind of retirement benefits. And so my question was, and I take Ms. Rickman, is that having to do other jobs to help bring in revenue, how did that affect your family in terms of when they reach age 65? Most farmers don't even care about that until they can't go anymore for retirement purposes, because then they will have to depend on Social Security and other means if they're not able to save any money. With you being much younger, how do you handle that in working in a family farm?
Thank you. My situation is might be a little unique and different perspective. My parents did not farm. My father grew up in the city of Cedar Falls, and he worked for the University of Northern Iowa as a landscape groundskeeper. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. For me personally, right now, we have profit sharing at the work, and we have a 401k program at our operation. As far as retirement, and I guess honestly I haven't thought about it yet. But the operation that we work for, my husband and I both work for, has an excellent profit sharing program and 401k benefits, and that is where we are putting our money right now. So other than that, I can't speak on other operations.
Right, and I know my time expired, but I've always been concerned about farmers, especially cattle farmers and so forth, how, if you get a chance to, Mr. Chairman, if extended, how do you go about preparing for the future?
Well, to be honest, the way that my wife and I look at this, our retirement is what we are able to accumulate over the hopefully 50, 60 years that we farm. And we always tease, it's kind of a joke at my house, my retirement is the 4 legs of cows and equipment that I have running around. That's my retirement. And so there again is my concern. If my son wants to come back to the farm and he comes back and comes into the operation, when I get in my later years, we should be in a comfortable position that he can come into our farm, get into the operation, and we be successful. But at the end, when it comes, if I have to continue to worry about inheritance tax and estate planning, that makes it harder on my wife and I to be comfortable to get to have enough money that I can provide for my wife if something was to happen for me. So that's why it is most important to us on this estate tax. It lets us continue to do our business today the way it needs to be done and not manipulate the way that we have to do business.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Luke Meyer, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As somebody who raised hogs and cattle for about 20 years growing up, I thank all of you for your testimony this morning. It brings back a lot of memories. Still have a farm, but don't get too much with it because I spend too much time here in D.C. But just wanted, Mr. Lawrence, you have in your testimony a ongoing challenges list, and one of them, two of them are technology and information, and part of it is open access tools and broadband. This is a real concern. You know, these folks next to you here, I'm sure their businesses are such that they look at the commodities market every day and probably need to have access to that. And without broadband, it's very difficult to be able to manage their operations in a way that is in their best interests. And so, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I know this is a concern that I have with regards to, I represent a very rural district as well.
Well, on a couple of notes, the one you just mentioned, access to information in a timely manner. The other is it relates to small businesses and small entrepreneurs in these rural areas that may be the farmers themselves or that are hiring farmers. The other one about the technology really gets at data portability. We have machines collecting information now on every acre and on animals and so on, but who owns that data? How, if it is in a green machine and I want to put it in a red machine, do they talk to one another? Do I have access to it? Those are some policy issues as well as some that the marketplace is still trying to figure out. But as information is powerful and has value, farmers being able to control that to their own best interest is absolutely essential.
Mr. White and Mr. Ricklan, would you like to comment on that?
Well, you know, in technology, yes, I follow the market every day. We do also graze some yearling cattle. I follow the market because I try to contract, and we have to do a lot of hedging in this day and time. If we're going to stay in business, the hedging is utmost and important. And so,
It's interesting that a stockbroker is one of your most important people at this point, isn't it?
yes,
Commodities broker.
yes, yes, you know, and there and
Like
again,
an
we
accountant or a doctor or a veterinarian. That's part of your portfolio of folks who help you
Yes.
manage your business.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and so if I could go back, you know, we have to follow that every day. We watch the market. You got to know this market moves so fast now that I mean, it's almost like you have to sit and watch your phone, or it can move $4 or $5 in seconds. You know, and used to $3 in a day, and you had to quit. So these things have changed in our lives. So it's not like we can't go sit on a tractor anymore and just drive and enjoy the sunshine. You got to be doing this, looking at your phone. You know, you have to have the technology with you. What would we do without our phones? You know, but it comes back. You know, the one thing that does concern me with what you're asking, it comes back to the GIPSA rule, because if competitive marketing goes away, I will no longer need that. I don't need my phone for marketing because I'm going to get one price for my product just like everybody else across the board. And so, but that's the way I make my living, sitting and watching that market and hitting it at the right time.
So access to broadband is very, very important.
Oh,
to your
yes,
operations.
yes.
Ricklan, would you like to comment?
I would have to agree with what Dr. Lawrence and Mr. White said. The availability of knowledge and resources to make good marketing decisions is something that we need on a farm. And like Mr. White said, it's not something that you can decide what you're going to do in the morning and then look at it the next morning. It's something you have to be looking at and thinking about every day, every morning. So yes, I would just concur with what they've said.
Thank you. Mr. Connor, you brought up and discussed, made several comments with regards to the border tax that's in the proposed plan at this point, which is not necessarily much more than just a blueprint. It's pretty sketchy, rough structure right there. So there's not a lot set in stone, but I was kind of curious, you know, I mean, I can argue it either way. I don't really have any strong feelings either way on it, so don't take my remarks one way or the other here, because I'm still trying to gather information on this to make sure we do this right. But you know, my understanding is that not only if you sell product, you don't get charged tax on that either. Is that correct? Because whenever you import product, there's taxes charged on that. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Congressman.
So if you import other food products that compete with what farmers are producing here, that would have, at this point, I think, a 20% tax on that product. Not would help make our products more competitive. Is that not correct?
Well, I think our fear on the 20% tax, and again, we are in much the same, we're more than even you in the same position, and that obviously details are sketchy, but
Right.
I use, for example, fertilizer that
Right.
is essential on our farms and ranches. We import, I'm going to use the figure, roughly 90% of our potash, that's an essential fertilizer for agricultural production in this country. You know, you throw a 20% tax on that, what's going to happen? The farmer's going to pay more, period. And his ability, there's an argument that says, well, that it may get it back in terms of not taxing other things, but remember, the farmer is a price taker in that circumstance, and when you're raising his cost of production as a price taker, you're pretty much taking that out of his bottom line. And so, just there needs to be a lot of caution. And I say that as an organization that is a very strong proponent of tax reform in general, and we would like to, figure out a way to make all these revenue numbers work. But that's one that could be a big problem.
I appreciate your perspective. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from American Samoa, Ms. Radewagen, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome and thank the panel for coming here today to testify before the subcommittee about the state of America's small family farms. I'm proud to have been added to this subcommittee this Congress because the majority of the small businesses in my home district of American Samoa are small family farms. And these farms are the soul of the local community, each run by a family who sell their produce at the market in the center of Pango Pango. Our farmers' markets provide many of our families their only source of income. However, the only market these farmers have is the local market, which means that our farmers' income relies solely on the health of the American Samoan economy at large. What would you recommend for farmers like those in the territories whose incomes are more prone to shocks?
I have to admit, I do not know much about your situation, but it would clearly depend on the ability of your consumers to pay. So a healthy economy for your local consumers that are buying is a key part of it. And then the ability to export, even if it is to other states as well as other countries. And that likely gets at not only regulations, but finding those markets and what the quality demands and types of specifications that they're asking for.
Thank you. And if you have any recommendations how we can promote the produce of really small farms in more than just their local areas.
I'd be happy to visit with you more about this later because it requires more detail, but obviously transportation and perishability works against you. And so how do you preserve that in a way that can be shipped to other locations would be one of the first obstacles.
Thank you. Mr. White? And you're very correct about the handheld devices and the little things, even out in those remote islands that I call my home district. Our farmers are out there farming coconuts and taro on the mountainside, and they've got these handheld devices while they're planting the taro and everything. So do you have any perspective on these two questions I just asked?
Well, I mean, it's, you are at a disadvantage because, like you said, transportation is huge. But then the other thing, adding a niche marketing and value marketing basis in your products, it would be something that I guess I would recommend. I know, and this wouldn't be exactly the same, but in our Kentucky, we have what you call Kentucky Proud. And it's a marketing base, statewide marketing base, that is a value-added program that they use to market across the country. And it goes, honestly, when consumers see that, in today's time, consumers like to know where their products are coming from. And so from that standpoint, that I think that would help you from that standpoint.
Thank you. Ms. Rickman?
I would say, kind of going off what Mr. White said, I had this written down, niche markets and maybe a different crop or selling it to consumers in a different way. I know for us on our farm, we try to be very transparent in showing consumers what we do, having tours of our farm and having them go through the barn before we put the pigs in the barn. Something like that could help consumers buy more, be more interested in what you have to offer at the market.
Mr. Connor?
Congresswoman, I'm going to be pretty self-serving here and suggest to you that I don't think probably your circumstance is probably too much different than our producers here on the mainland in terms of being able to find new markets and export those products. A lot of that happens here on the mainland through farmer-owned cooperatives, doing as a group what each individual probably can't do themselves. And then even among the largest farmers here, their ability to go, and contract, for example, with the Chinese or the Mexicans or something, even the very largest can't do that. It's outside of their, ability to sort of cobble all that together. But through a cooperative, through, joining together with their other producers, they are able to do those kinds of things. And I think that kind of sector is ripe for farmer-owned co-ops that control their own destiny, their own business, and they're able collectively to do those kinds of things and find the markets outside of their own little community.
Very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon, is recognized for 5 minutes.
As you can imagine, with the name Bacon, I've been taking this in real well. But thanks, Mr. Chairman, for the time, and I thank each of you for being here. I was raised on a family farm, still an extended family, corn, soybeans. We had about 50 head of cattle. So it was, and it was a good childhood for learning work ethic and prepared me well for 30 years in the Air Force to follow. So I wanted to talk a little bit about bilateral trade and also health care. I'll start off with the health care because I don't think we've talked much about it today. In Nebraska, we had a 51% increase in premiums this past year. It falls most heavily on self-employed, small business, and of course we're talking about the family farmer who's having to pay for their own premiums. And we have had a 45% to 50% drop in prices, land values going down, throw in a 51% cost in premiums. Could you talk about how ACA has impacted you in your income and expenses? And do you have any feedback on the bill we're getting ready to vote on today? We'll start off with Dr. Lawrence, or we'll go down the line. Thank you.
I'm not in that situation, right? I have a benefit package through university, so I don't think it's fair for me to comment.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. White.
My health insurance for my family this year went up over 100%.
100%.
100%.
You're probably asking for relief, aren't you?
Well, it would be nice because it does. We talk about people not having insurance, and that is you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have insurance, but it does come to a time that the economics of things make you do things that you don't that maybe you can't do. And we have to have health coverage, and I understand that is vital. Especially in farming, I have been injured. I know what it means to be. I know what a big hospital bill is. So it is an issue that we have to take care of. On today's vote, I really couldn't give you an opinion one way or the other than give our state an opportunity to have some competitive bidding on insurance.
Right, and we voted on that yesterday out of the House. Would tax credits help you when you buy your own insurance?
Sure it would.
Okay, it's in this bill. How about expanded HSA where you get tax deductions? Would that help you?
I currently use HSA.
Okay, thank you. That's answering the question that way. Ms. Ricklan.
I don't think I've ever thought about insurance till I was pregnant. I'm 20 weeks pregnant. But yes, I buy my own insurance through Farm Bureau. So does my husband. And the vote would be very, very helpful. We have a health savings account, but as the delivery comes, there's bills and things that we need to pay for, and it definitely weighs heavy on our minds.
If you don't mind me asking, if you feel comfortable, what's your deductible? Because I find people with their deductible so high, they pay every cent of their delivery of their child. Is that, you're in that boat?
Yes.
See, that's not right. Mr. Connor.
Congressman, the healthcare challenges for rural America are, everything that all of our urban counterparts face and then some. And I can't advise you, on today's vote. I will tell you that farmer-owned co-ops do believe that one of the, things that hinders co-ops from getting into this space of providing health care for their members is, the fact that there are the state line limitations. And that, that's, I know, something that's been part of that debate. But let me just say as well that, a big issue for rural health care is equally as much as just access to the doctors themselves. Programs like and I'm outside of my expertise space here a little bit, but I know programs like, the J1 program for, bringing doctors to the rural areas, because in some cases at any cost there just simply aren't doctors available. And that's as fundamental as the whole health care.
We've been hearing the same thing in rural Nebraska as
it's
well.
tough.
I think the current ACA bills probably hurt the family farmer as much as anybody, and I think we got to work hard to get relief now. And the HSAs and the tax credits for buying your own insurance will have a huge impact. I don't have a whole lot of time left, but on bilateral trade, Nebraska's a huge export state. Is there any advice, if you guys got more insight versus another one, are there particular countries we should be looking at more? How would you advise the administration to prioritize on this bilateral trade work that we need to be doing?
Obviously, don't screw up what you've got, right? Go where the money is and the markets are. China continues to be a growing market, so how do we continue to tap into that one while maintaining our Canada and Mexico, our two large trading partners, Japan, and open up more countries?
Thank you.
And to add to that, from the aspect from the cattle industry, 96% of the population is outside our borders. And a majority, we see a premium of about $300 per fed steer to the cuts that are less desirable in the United States, that other countries think are premium cuts. And so anything we can do to level the playing field where we can get our product out of this country and help us move product would be a benefit for us.
I would just say, Congressman, Japan.
Japan
would be a huge one. And, if we are indeed in an era of bilateral trade agreements versus multilateral, my advice to them is get to it.
Yep. As I yield back, I'll just say Japan has, I think, a 40% tariff on cattle, so we got to work on that. Sir, thank you, Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from the great state of Kentucky is recognized, Mr. Comer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me begin by thanking all the panel for testifying today, and I want to single out Ms. Ricklan first. Thank you for your story. It's very inspiring. I grew up showing cattle at 4-H and FFA events all over Kentucky and everywhere else, and went to Western Kentucky University, got a degree in agriculture, and then started my farming operation pretty much from scratch, and that's what I do. I'm a full-time farmer, so I always love seeing people, the next generation of farmers decide to stay on the farm and hopefully pass it on to the next generation. So good luck, congratulations, and good luck in your career. I want to welcome Mr. White, my fellow Kentucky Cattlemen's Association member. Appreciate you being here. I had a few questions for you. Describe your experience with the estate tax. What are your thoughts on the need to permanently repeal the tax or whatever?
Well, in my experience, like I alluded back, my father was sick 15 years ago, and as we started going through it, my father was in construction, and his CPA told him, said, you need to start doing something because what inheritance tax will do to the liability. And the farm that originally that I'm farming now, my father did buy, and my wife and I ended up buying that back from him. And so the struggle that we had of, one, paying an outside entity to put together a program for my family to pass this forward, it took, we took several years, and we and it worked out. Financially, it worked out because we were far enough ahead of it, and the industry stayed good, cash flow was good, and everything worked. But when you look at the estate tax today, how that would be detrimental to what we would have to do is just unbelievable. And so, it's the only way. Removing this tax is really the only way that we can continue as a small family farm to operate, because our margins are so close. They're just pennies now, And so we just have to do everything. Healthcare, we have to do everything, but this is huge for us that we have to look at in the future.
You mentioned country of origin labeling. Is there a legitimate push to reinstate that program? If so, by who, and why would they think it might work this time around?
No, there's not a push, not from us, from producer side. There's no push because we went through 6.5 years of implementation of this program, and it showed us no benefit at all financially for the producer or for the consumers to do this. So we've been through the courts. We found out that we were not in compliance with the national law, and so this just needs to go on by. We don't need this to come back.
Okay. You mentioned the foot and mouth disease vaccine bank. Can you talk about the need for a more adequate bank, and what would the economic impact be to the beef industry and many small family farming operations such as yours if there were an outbreak?
Well, if foot and mouth disease comes to the United States with the way social media is today, it would be an instant crash of every market, not just the cattle market, not corn, not pigs, every market. And what that would turn around economically. So that trickles down to me. I can't sell my product. Then I can't turn around and pay my supplier that I bought supplies from, equipment from. It goes all the way back, and it'll go to the consumer. Eventually, this thing will tackle our whole nation, because the food supply is something that we have to be sustainable.
When I was Commissioner of Agriculture in Kentucky, we were over the large animal veterinarians. Number one priority in our division of the Office of State Veterinarian was to prevent livestock disease outbreak. So I appreciate your mention of this vaccine bank, and I appreciate your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio, Chairman Chabot, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. We pronounce it Shabbat, but that's okay. I know, Mr. Chairman. I said don't screw it up, so I'm just kidding. But in any event, I thought that I would mention just a couple things first. First of all, the Sweet 16 came up, so I have some bragging rights here too. Xavier University is in my district, and they beat Maryland in the first round. And my apologies, Mr. Lawson, but they beat Florida State in the second round, and they're playing Arizona, I understand, this evening. So. And I sent my wife because they had all the members in a write-up. It was Politico or The Hill or one of the local rags up here in Washington. So I sent it back to her to show her that I had both Xavier and Cincinnati. And she told me that I'm the only member that had two teams in March Madness. So I thought that was kind of cool. But there's one left, and it's Xavier. And in any event, what I wanted to ask you, Mr. White, for some of us city folks, I thought it was kind of interesting when you said you had a bull sale this Saturday, and that sounds like something that's much more interesting than what I'll probably be doing this Saturday. So for us city folks, could you kind of tell us what that entails, how much of your time and advertising, and just how you get the word out there, and just all that kind of stuff?
Well, this is our third annual purebred Angus bull and female sale. This sale will bring in about 40% of my yearly income. Wow. It's a major part of our life. I mean, it's one section. We're a very diversified operation, but this is one major portion of it. What is entailed in it? we're selling service age breeding stock, okay? We're going to have the auction will be held at our farm, at our facility there in Lexington. We'll have probably 200 producers from Kentucky. I do have several Ohio producers that come and purchase from us. They come down and there is a lot of work to this. A lot of advertising, social media advertising, newspaper, print advertising, and the biggest thing my biggest advertisement in my operation is my wife and I's determination that we are always honest, straightforward, and we back up the product that we produce. And it's that we're that way in everything that we produce. If it's grain or cattle or fed cattle or whatever it is, you know, it's something that is near and dear to us. This is a business we love. We love the cattle business. If we didn't, we probably wouldn't be in it, to be honest. But we love what we do. We're very passionate about what we do.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rickman, let me ask you, I think it was you that mentioned how much regulations can hinder success in your industry. Could you give us some examples of the kind of regulations that are either burdensome or, you know, don't make sense? President Trump, for example, recently talked about getting rid of 2 regulations for every new one that comes out, which I think seemed like a pretty good idea. So in your industry, are there some that you think are particularly egregious or that we ought to look at?
Thank you for the question. The waters of the U.S. regulation really threatened every farm in the country and every landowner as well. I'm glad that the EPA will be writing this rule, but it's things like that that are enacted here in D.C. or thought about here in D.C. that they might not really know what's going on the real farms in Iowa. Mm-hmm. These are the things that I worry about. EPA rules in general, things like that are concerning to me, and this is why I'm here today to share my story of what really goes on Iowa farms.
Thank you. And in the time that I have left here, which isn't a whole lot, in the area of TPP and trade, I tend to be more of a free trader myself, and so I've been a bit disappointed in kind of the direction that we've seen, but the president has talked about bilateral deals rather than regional, multi-country deals. I hope he's right and that I'm wrong, that it'll work, but and I know you've all already touched on this, but does one of you want to, again, touch on the importance of trade, you know, especially with the agricultural industry and what it means?
Well, Congressman, I'll take a quick shot at that. I mean, it's fundamental to our livelihood in American agriculture. We already export, you know, a substantial percentage of our product. You know, nearly half of our soybeans, approaching 60%, a large percentage of our pork production. You know, just you name the commodity, it's very, very export dependent. And as all of us testified, you know, most of the consumers of the world are living outside the United States. The upside demand potential for additional food consumption here in the United States is really pretty limited. But our productivity scale in American agriculture is on a very steep incline. And, you know, if we don't find new markets, you know, there is absolutely no hope for the family farm, for the small family farm in particular, because they just simply will not be needed because, you know, we have limited ourselves to a relatively flat domestic market only and already a very small percent of the world's mouths to be fed. We can't do that. We've got to export. And these, you know, these trade deals, whether multilateral or bilateral, again, we prefer the multilateral, but if it's bilateral now, get to it and get these markets open so we can get prices back to profitable levels.
Thank you very much. My time's expired.
Thank you, Chairman Shabbat. Sheep and rabbit, correct?
And I learned that it's Blum and not Bloom, right? So there we go.
See, there is hope. With the indulgence of the ranking member, I would like to ask one more question. Absolutely. One last question for the panel, and I'm going to write your answers down, and you can see this as a lightning round, if you will. We have trouble focusing in Washington, I think. There's a lot of issues, and I'd just like to know, you give me the last word, what are the top 2 or 3 issues that the federal government can help the small family farmer? Top 2 or 3 issues, and let's go right down the line, and I'm writing down what you say.
I think access to capital, technology, and markets is key. I think a strong rural economy, and so that may be broader than just crop insurance and farm bill type issues, but there's a strong synergy between small farms and small communities.
Mr. White?
Stop over regulation and the estate tax.
Thank you. Ms. Rickman?
Overregulation and strong and adequately funded farm bill.
And thank you, Mr. Connor.
Certainly, regulatory reform would be at the top of our agenda. I would add as well, Congressman, we expect a large infrastructure bill. Rural America should get its fair share of that infrastructure bill, which would include things like broadband, the discussion we had earlier in the hearing. That would be very, very important. And then finally, tax reform.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our witnesses today for your testimony. You all were excellent, and congratulations once again, Ms. Rickman, on the upcoming addition to your family. Appreciate it very much. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned.
Yes.